Hello Internet, this is part 2 of my working part-time, this time from the worker's perspective. Let's get going. Hello again. So whoever caught my part 1 video, I'm a part-time or flexible worker. So basically means I work 3 days out of the usual kind of standard 5 in a week. Now this video is from the worker's perspective, so things that I can do that really help my team. If you want to hear what a team can do to help someone who works part-time or flexibly, then please catch my part 1 of this video. As a part-time worker, I'm very aware how rare it can be in some offices, and a lot of people don't necessarily know how to deal with people who do work part-time. Working part-time is somewhat of an unknown, and it very much does involve working differently to someone who does work the full 5 days a week. Unfortunately, there is a lot of discrimination around flexible workers, and as a flexible worker who very much champions other people's choice in working flexibly, whatever form that may be, whether it's part-time or working from home or whatever, I very much want to educate people to understand how flexible working can be achieved in a workspace. One thing I really want to do is to break down the barriers of what people perceive as working flexibly or working part-time, whatever form that may take. There's a lot of discrimination out there as to people thinking that it's very much a negative in the workspace, but that's simply not the case. And as someone who works part-time, I know that there's a lot of things that I do that are different from people who do work full-time, and there are considerations that I need to take to compensate for things that other people might not be expecting from me. Even if you do have a very accepting team, there are definitely certain working practices which I utilise to really help my team know exactly what work I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and the status and all that kind of thing. So let's proceed to my top 10 list. So whoever caught my first video, I've got 3 main sections again, 3 or 4 items per section. So let's get to the first one. So straight off, we're going to go to help your team. So now these might be fairly intuitive, especially if you are working flexibly. But point number 1 is handoffs. So I work the beginning of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't work Thursday and Friday. No work will be done by me on Thursday and Friday. However, it's very important that my team knows exactly where I am on a Wednesday, whether I need to hand off to someone to continue the work, or hand off to my team so they know how long things are going to take. With an added bonus, if I do a good handoff, when I come back in Monday, which is 4 days since I last worked on it, there'll be a good update for me to check up on. So it's very much a handoff to my team, but also don't forget handing off to yourself is incredibly important. Somewhat aligned with that, I would always recommend having conversations of open. And so what I mean by that is, so my team, we use Slack, whatever instant messaging platform your company uses. If there is a functionality to have conversations on a public channel, so in Slack you can have them on public workspaces. And I would always recommend, unless there's anything kind of private or confidential, to try and have any conversation in those public places, which very much means that people can see what you are working on last. So on the day I'm not working, they can review conversations that I've had with people. In the same way, I very much encourage my team to try and keep conversations in public. So if there are things on a Thursday and Friday that have been discussed, then on a Monday I can quickly nip up and look at the chat log, which very means that if there are discussions that I would be very interested in, I can semi-participate even though it's a couple of days down the line. And the final point 3 in my help your team section, is be ruthless with meetings. There's very much a temptation for people to say, oh, this meeting's on Thursday, let's move it to Tuesday because James is in then. If there is a meeting that I'm not going to be able to contribute and not going to be valuable to me, and my team is putting extra effort in to move it for me, I very much value that effort, and I really appreciate the recognition of my working hours. However, with a limited amount of time that I am in the office per week, only 3 days, every meeting that I attend, which is not so useful for me, is a bigger proportion of my work week. This is very much something that everyone should be doing. Don't go to meetings you're not required to. But if my team does specifically reschedule for me, there is very much a pressure to go. And it's very important to be open and honest and say, I don't think I need to be in that meeting. You don't schedule me in for that meeting. Keep it to whatever works for the rest of the team. And that leads us quite nicely to the second set of 3, which is be open and honest. There is very much a temptation to not mention that you are working part-time, not mention you're working flexibly, particularly to clients and things like that. Unfortunately, due to the discrimination for people who do work flexibly, people can be very hesitant to actually mention to their colleagues that they don't work with on a day-to-day basis, that they are flexibly working. I very much understand why someone would do this, would hide that they are working flexibly. But in my opinion, this is not a situation you want to be in. If people find out later you're working part-time, it might be a bit strange. So in particular, my point number 4 is always tell your clients you're working flexibly. Now, I usually say, please bear in mind, I don't work Thursday, Fridays. If you need to get hold of me for whatever reason, you can contact this person instead, and they'll probably be able to help you out. If not, I will be back in the work on Monday, and I'll address it as soon as I can. There is a temptation not to tell your clients, and I understand that because there is a fear that the client might think, oh, they're not taking us seriously. We want someone who's in full time, who can always answer our emails, all that kind of thing. It's much better to let a client know what your situation is, and realistically, nothing needs to be done on that day that has to be done by you. Always have a secondary contact which can back you up on days you're not in or times you're not in. And in the same kind of way, if you're ill or taking holiday, you would hand off to someone. Exactly the same way, just have a secondary email that they can contact one of your colleagues. So I would always tell your clients you are working part-time, just so they have the correct expectations, they know when they can contact you, and they do know that if they need to get in contact with you, there's other people they can talk to. Next up is be very honest about when you're going to get around to work. So point number 5 is, I will deal with it when I'm back in the office. So if someone gives me a piece of work on Wednesday, say, and expects it to be done by the end of the week, it is my responsibility to say, I don't work Thursdays and Fridays. I will be able to get to it on Monday morning. Now, I would always very much be very kind of matter of fact with it. Unless another member of my team can work on it on Thursday and Friday, then this won't be progressed at all until Monday. It's always good to have sort of a status somewhere, like on Slack, for example. You can, by your name, have your working hours, or in your email signature, you can have your working hours, something like that, just to avoid the situation where someone asks you to do something and you're unable to do it in the time frame that they expect. But it is your responsibility to let people know what hours you do work, because people will make assumptions, and that is very understandable. So in summary, just be open and honest about your hours. Making people aware is very important. In the same kind of way, it's very important you always let someone know how long something's going to take. If someone gives me a piece of work that will take a usual worker 2 weeks, I need to say then it's probably going to take me 3 or 4 weeks. Is that okay in your deadline? Again, this is all about being open and honest about your working situation in an unapologetic way, but very professionally giving someone an indication of what their expectations should be. And now section 3 is prioritise yourself. So straight up, point number 7, I've mentioned it a few times, but you don't need to apologise. You never need to apologise for working flexibly or part-time. If someone is surprised that work's going to take long, you don't need to say sorry. You just need to say, those are my hours. This is when I can do it. Is that acceptable? If not, let's try and find a compromise. Let's try and find a solution. Maybe we could cut down on the work scope, or we could pair with someone else, or bring in someone else to work on this in addition, or whatever arrangement that is. You never need to say, I'm sorry, I don't work those hours. If I need to be home to look after my kids, which is the reason I work part-time, I'm never going to say sorry to one of my colleagues because of that. It's not something I'm doing. Working flexibly is never something you are doing wrong. It's something you are choosing to do, whether that be your genuine choice of that's how many hours you want to work, or you're prioritising different things. It's always your choice, and that's nothing you should ever apologise for. Next up is training. Now, as a part-time worker who has a smaller amount of time per week, you very much have to work smart, not hard. Now, training is something that every worker should be trying to do if it's applicable for their job. But of course, when you are working part-time and you're trying to keep up with the rest of the team doing the main work of your job, it's really tricky to carve out some time for training. Of course, it's something that pretty much in any office, it's always somewhat overlooked. It's always prioritised lowest. It's really hard to do, but it's very important, especially as someone who is working part-time, to keep growing yourself, just keep growing your skills. I would always advise someone to block off a couple of hours in a week, which you are reserving for something like training. You block it off in your calendar so people know not to book meetings at that point. At least then you have the option to use that for training. Or if there is priority work coming up, then naturally that usually does take precedence. But if possible, try and get a little bit of training in each week. Just because you're working part-time or flexibly does not mean you shouldn't be constantly working on yourself, constantly doing your training and driving for your future career. And very much along those lines, point number 9 is go for promotions. Just based on you work less hours, it may take you longer to kind of build up your promotion case or take on the responsibility or whatever it may be that your office uses for figuring out promotions. But always, if it's something you do want to aspire to, just because you are part-time doesn't mean you should stop. Whenever I do a good piece of work, I've got a document I write it down in. It goes straight into my promotion case. I'm very much driving for my promotions. In fact, there is definitely a few things in my promotion case which are linked to my part-time working, as my work does very much consider contributing to the work environment, assisting your others, helping others as valuable things to work towards. So one of our sort of key points that we aim for is helping others, and I use my part-time work and aiding others doing part-time work that contributes towards that. So in theory, in many countries, discriminating against people who do work part-time is illegal. They shouldn't be putting you off for promotion just because you do work part-time. Now, if there are certain levels such as responsibility or knowledge or whatever that you need to gain, sometimes that does take a little bit longer because you are effectively doing less hours. You might have less time for training, see previous section. But you should still be going for promotion, and if you are being discriminated against because you are working flexibly, then that is definitely something to look into. As a part-time or flexible worker, you are not setting aside your career for your personal life. You're working on them both at the same time. And your career needs to advance just as much as if you were working full-time. And my final point number 10, is prioritise your personal time. Now, I hear quite a lot of the cases where people do work flexibly, do take part-time, and they try and make up for it in their personal time. Well, no, you're not getting paid for that. As I've said before, you're not getting paid for that. You shouldn't need to work that time. Even on a Thursday, for example, when I'm not working, if I do something on that day that is work, that is above and beyond. That is not, I'm just working on a Thursday, which everyone does. That is me working on my personal time, which I very much try never to do, only in exceptional circumstances if the business really needs it. Once I finish work on a Wednesday, that's the end of my work week. My laptop closes and doesn't open again. That's very much protective time. In essence, always prioritise yourself. You know what you need to do at work. Don't let other people bully you or make you worry about you're not pulling your weight. And I think that's my top 10 list all complete now. Thank you guys for staying with me this far. Let me just pop something up, a little summary of all the points we've gone through. I very much encourage you to review your working conditions. If there's anything you think you should change to help yourself or your team, very much be empowered to make those decisions. Look after yourself and look after anyone else in your team who might be working flexibly, because they probably do need a little bit of backup with that. And if you guys want any tips that a team can do if you're working with someone who is flexibly working and you want to know how you can make their lives easier, then please check out my part 1 of this video, which is from the team perspective. Thanks everyone for watching, and hopefully this has been somewhat interesting and hopefully useful for you. And please like and subscribe, all that YouTube standard stuff, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Thanks.